This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by Atom Audio, Isotope, Native Instruments, Lewitt, and Grace Design. You're hearing my voice right now on the Lewitt PureTube microphone through the Grace Design M201 Mark II mic pre mixed through Isotope, RX, Ozone, Neutron, and Nectar, all on Atom Audio monitors. Please check out our awesome sponsors using the link in the show notes below. It's a great way to help support this show, and there's some great deals waiting for you there. Now get ready to rock.
Think about now you could take a vocal and you could take a specific section of it, duplicate it, convert it to MIDI, then have it play an instrument and only have that instrument go to a reverb. And you have the ability to raise or lower the octave of that instrument. These are all things that, used tastefully a little bit, create an incredible depth.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Atom Audio's S-Series, crafted in Berlin, is a flagship line of reference monitors featuring 5 models. From the compact S2V all the way up to the powerful S5H, the range builds on Atom Audio's iconic heritage with new technology for improved acoustic performance. With new woofers, redesigned waveguides, and a DSP engine, the S-Series ensures accurate frequency response, consistent dispersion, enhanced detail, and a forward-looking digital connectivity. Backed by a 5-year guarantee, Atom Audio monitors embody durability and professional sound for your studio at atomaudio.com. Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound kind of weak or distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding much closer to professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools, and the best part is that these mixing techniques work for you in any DAW, whether you're on Logic, Cubase, Studio One, Reaper, anything you can think of. If you're ready now to make your best record ever, then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Hey Rockstars, it's your host Lid Shaw. Welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio, back into the studio in fact, to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is a repeat guest, Joe Baldridge, joining us back on the podcast. I think the last episode we did was RSR444. Joe is a multi-Grammy winning engineer with over 36 years of professionally credited experience in music production, recording, mixing, artist management, and brand artist development with nearly 600 credits on allmusic.com, and has received a nomination for 2014 Record of the Year for work on Taylor Swift's Red, and won a Dove Award for production work with Toby Mac. Joe's a graduate of Belmont University, where he also now teaches. He joined the Audio Engineering Technology Department at the Mike Curb College of Entertainment and Music Business as an adjunct in 2010, Fulltime Lecturer in 2013, and Instructor in 2019. He's now the Director of Studio Operations right here at Ocean Way Nashville, where we're joining you today. Designed by Alan Sides and purchased by Belmont University in 2001, and the #1 tracking room in Nashville and a world-class teaching facility that also serves an impressive client roster. Housed in a 100-year-old Gothic revival gray stone church, Ocean Way Nashville provides an exceptional acoustic space, all in the rich visual beauty of a sanctuary. The studio serves a diverse list of clients spanning various styles from pop, rock, hip-hop, country, gospel, while emerging as the premier scoring facility in the Southeast. Besides being a sought-after space for full band tracking, Ocean Way Nashville has become an internationally favored destination for orchestral recording and scoring for today's most popular films and video games. Joe continues to teach in the classroom through an adjunct role, teaching master mixing techniques, a course he designed, which meets right here at Ocean Way. As I said, Joe was a guest on the podcast back on episode 61 when he shared his story of getting into music and later teaching. And today I'm happy to have him back to talk more about what he teaches in the master mixing class and to focus on the future of music making in the studio. Please welcome Joe Baldridge back to Recording Studio Rockstars. Joe, my brother, are you ready to rock?
I am ready to rock.
Rock. Can you do a good rock scream?
I thought that was.
I mean, that was a good one.
Yeah, Yeah.
I'm having to learn to do a little Michael Jackson this week. All right.
Are you ready?
Does anybody here like fucking orange juice?
I believe we can raise the roof off this mofo.
So, dude, it's good to see you here, man. We are in Studio C at Ocean Way. Is that right?
Yeah. Some people call it the basement.
The basement. It's a pretty nice room. It's a great
It is.
Oh, and look at that fireplace. Holy crap.
Yeah. There's usually a nice family of bats, I think. I just like to think they're bats.
Yeah. I don't want to reveal too much about the timing of this episode, Rockstars, but we are a week before Halloween when we're recording this. So
yeah, we've got lots of
bats coming out of the fireplace would be pretty good.
Ocean Way, being from the turn of the 20th century and 19th into the 20th, we've got some good stories. Yeah. So I can't remember. I think this was here when I was here last time. This Studio C or the basement's not brand new, right? It's been no. Alan Asides and Gary Bells, they designed this in the original design, and I believe it had a. I'm wanting to say it was either a Cambridge or a Capricorn. It was a digital console that they'd started in B that they moved down here when they switched out the B console for an analog desk.
Right. The Cambridge was a great,
yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it was a great board. I didn't get to work on one much, but everybody I knew that worked on them said they were awesome sounding.
I think that they had, they were pretty early on, as Alan tends to be. And I think that Sal Greco with them helped work through a lot of bugs in the actual console. So it was very cool.
And then they went on to become the Sonics plugins, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I've got some of those. I don't think I have the EQ now. I have in the past, but limiter and the inflator. But they wouldn't have had an inflator plugin in a console.
No.
Right?
But I'm sure that they had limiting and compression. But
yeah.
I mean, that was the original sort of hype your mix up in different ways. I still love that plugin. I use it rarely. I
need to use it more. I mean, I got it again. I've been using it in mastering recently. That's kind of where I always used it.
Yeah.
Got to inflate your master, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, maybe.
We'll
talk about
if
that.
It's needed.
So let's see. We probably talked about this on the last interview, but of course, this building has quite a history to it too. And where we are right now in the basement, was that the famous spot where either the cats or the preacher's wife was frozen on a block of ice or something like that?
I'm not sure about the block of ice, but yes, I mean,
I don't want to get anybody in trouble here, but
and there's I think they've already gotten in trouble and they've passed, but they still have a following, which is bizarre. But in the history of the building, fortunate for audio, it had a dark period in the 80s where it was basically the head of a cult,
like a holy roller church.
Had the no, it wasn't that. It was just a giant manipulation sort of. It's been interesting. I was watching a series of documentaries that I find interesting because throughout my career I've met a lot of musicians that a lot of us started out in Nashville and other parts of the world in Christian music. And that took on many forms. In the very beginning, it was trying to copy what was going on. Then there was a period in the 90s where it was trying to be out in front within its genres.
Remind us where you grew up again.
I grew up in Southern Illinois.
Right.
And my bass player in my band, Roger Horst, he listened to like Resurrection Band, and some of these other bands that were like sort of from the hippie Jesus movement that were actually really good bands. But I didn't know anything about it until I came down here, and then I started working in it. But there was this common thing in the charismatic movement, which attached itself to a lot of Christian music and a lot of musicians that I've gotten to know, where there was, I guess they maybe call it prosper gospel. So there were a lot of televangelists, and there were a lot of people who did this. So this con man from California, who was basically a used car salesman, met a B or C level actress, convinced her to come to Nashville to be Tony and Susan Alamo, have a church, make records, make custom clothing for stars, and all this. And it was housed in these buildings. Before that, it had pretty much a rich history of like faith and art and all of this. It was actually built. It was an offshoot of a church downtown that was charging money for people to sit in pews, and the pastor, who has an audio name, Daking, didn't want that to be the case. So they moved over here closer to like Scarrett and Peabody, Vanderbilt. It was probably, there was no word Belmont at this point. It was Antebellum, or Adelicia Ackland's mansion, Belmont
University at that point?
It would have been Ward Belmont, but I don't think it existed at the point where this was actually built to be a church from downtown, breaking off and meeting here from this pastor Daking, who was the grandfather of Tennessee Williams. So Tennessee Williams and his siblings were in this house that you're in. The groundskeeper, which is the Sea Lounge, that was sort of where he lived, and then you had the sanctuary next door, and you had to go through a lot of changes. It was a YMCA, it was community theater, and Martha Ingram and Massey, they met here to seed what became TPAC, which was built downtown. But this is where people were meeting, talking about the arts and talking about how to further arts in Tennessee.
Well, that's cool.
So there was a lot of
that's fitting, right?
Yeah, there was a lot of cool vibes, and then there was a con man who started a cult for a prosperity ministry.
Well, that puts a little rock and roll in it.
It does, yeah. And his wife died, and so he froze her and would seek guidance and convinced his congregation that she would rise from the dead. And when people started knowing that possibly that was occurring here, he got a refrigeration truck and had her driven around in that during the day, and then come back, and then eventually to the farm in Arkansas, where he would take in the 80s, Reagan into George Bush Sr. There was a lot of homeless, high mortgages, all of these sorts of things. So they would come into the church, they would go to Arkansas, roof over their head, cot, food, and they'd make custom clothing for stars to sell downtown in the Alamo.
Wow.
Yeah. And they were
competing with Nudie.
Yes. But and the pieces were like that. They were one-offs, and they were like $1,500 to $3,000. I mean, in that time, very expensive. And a lot of the rock bands would go in and try and sell items or things they were trying to get rid of. So when you had the whole alternative punk thing, you would have people getting pieces and wearing them, like Walk the West and Jason and the Scorchers and other bands coming through.
Wow.
It eventually, after that whole house of cards fell from the Alamo Church, and it fell because he would propaganda. He would place propaganda about the Illuminati, the 1%, and the Pope on everything. It was so scary. It was colorful, local flavor, but then there was this underlying like, man, there's something happening. I would literally, I think I said this in the other podcast, I would cross the street going back up to Belmont from studios. I would just walk and I would cross the street if the doors were open to this building because it was like such a heavy vibe. Yeah,
you didn't cross the street this direction. You crossed the street
no, I got away. Yeah, watching out.
Like a vacuum would just suck you right in the doors there.
Yeah, I think they got him on Runaways across state lines. So,
yeah. Now it's how many studios?
We have 3 studios.
A, B, and C.
Yeah, A, B, C. A is fully commercial, and B is academic in the fall and spring semester. We pretty much have from mid-April to mid-August to do commercial things here and there in B. C is fully commercial. Master mix is taught here. Mastering class is taught here. You
said fully commercial. Do you mean fully educational or?
No, fully educational. Sorry. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's of course where we're sitting rock stars in and as we began this, there is a fireplace right behind me where I guess this was, the big hearth once upon a time.
Yeah. Or maybe a sacrificial altar.
Sacrificial altar. And then there's the speakers just kind of like work their way up towards the fireplace. It's a very cool spot.
Yeah. Originally, the control room was in the other room, but you were always right under the drums in B. And as well, I just felt like they poured all of that concrete. What an incredible place to put speakers.
Yes.
And so we were able to flip the rooms with technology. You have like an S6 and a Dangerous Audio and a full Pro Tools rig, and there's 16 in and out. And there's a good collection of analog equipment and fully loaded Pro Tools rig with all the plugins.
Well, that will prompt me to ask all sorts of questions about things. But before I do, give us a quick description of A and B if you want.
Sure. So A was a sanctuary that the Decca Church built, and they were meeting here in the basement, and then they opened it up, I think, in 1912. And the actual podium stage for the choir, and probably there was an organ at some point, that's where the control room was constructed. So you can view this online at oceanwaynashville.com. And you have the large sanctuary. So what that room has lent itself to being is it's the largest room currently in Nashville because the other large rooms have gone away.
Yeah. It's essentially like a big sanctuary space of a church, right? But it's been divided up a little bit.
Yeah. In the front, the atrium where you would enter the church, we were able to build off walls inside and make booths. Alan and Gary Bells had that in the original construction. They treated the sanctuary room. It has a great sound, very even response. It was a great design, whether they came on it from design or tweaking it. The room is a thing. People love being in the sanctuary. They brought the windows from an older church, stained glass windows from an older church from the latter part of the 1800s. And it has great lighting all day. When it gets nighttime from the outside, the street lights and everything out comes through. It's very cool.
How often would you have a string ensemble or something here when the sun set anyway?
Well, the scoring sessions run very different. So orchestra will have 10 and 2, and then occasionally they'll have an evening session. I would say that's the least common, but sometimes there's lots of things scheduled. If there's a last minute thing, or if there's a thing that people are trying to get into the space, they will take that because the players can come to that, which is a traditional. Probably a lot of you young audio people out there don't realize that it was based around union schedule. A 10 was a 3-hour session with an hour break.
I didn't know that was union related. I just figured it was a good way to split up the day.
2 p.m. To 5 p.m. with hour break, 6 to 9. And they built in overtimes and union breaks inside of that if you were compliant to that sort of thing. But that's set sort of a tradition. I think most studios operate on like 12-hour blocks and overtime. I know that it's been a lot of different things throughout my career. Like the 12-hour block was, I remember in the beginning, it was set during the day. So you could come into the room as early as 7 or 8 and start setting up. You were going to have a downbeat at 10. You were expected to be stopping at 6, finishing up all of the documentation, everything you need. And then there might be someone else coming in after 7.
And then rock and roll sessions broke all those rules, right? Essentially, but.
Well, actually, there was a little bit in between there where that was the time that would be more affordable to like a band that was developing or had an audience, and they were more used to performing. Bands and artists were used to performing later in the day, so it fit perfect with them. As young engineers, it was a great opportunity because you could get in for less into great rooms, and you could get a better sound for that band that you were attached to, and that was like a really cool aspect. But like everyone has a setup now, so that's kind of like replace that. But it is still great if the way that we create music now, if you have the song, if you have a lot of the things decided, and you could grab a room for the nighttime into midnight, 1, 2, you could maybe grab a lot of different sounds. That's something that I would like there to be more opportunity for people to be able to commercially book it.
Hey, Rockstar, come on over here. I've got a secret to tell you. Want to know how I get a consistent sound mixing over 1,000 hours of recording studio rock stars? Well, my secret is using iZotope, RX, Ozone, Neutron, and Nectar to make this podcast sound great. Right now, you are hearing RX Breath Control, Declick, Declip, DS, Deplosive, Voice Denoise, Ozone Multiband Compression, Neutron EQ, and Limiting, all from iZotope. Use the secret code ROCK10 to get 10% off over at iZotope.com. Well, I mean, I could appreciate that too. So as somebody with a home studio, and I can record a band, it's, pretty tight quarters, like feels like recording in a submarine sometimes,
Sure.
Everybody's sort of a little bit on top of each other, but there's enough space. And of course I do that for my own stuff and I love doing that. But, then I also think, it would just be so nice to just walk into a place where like, there's plenty of room to stretch out. And, it's just like what you said. It's like, if we already know what we're going to do with the music and somebody else can engineer it and get great sounds in a studio setting, that'd be pretty sweet.
It works out well because there's that thing where you can be in a large room. RCA A is like this as well, and you can probably do it to a certain extent in A or D at Blackbird, but RCA A and Ocean Way have the actual space to where you can set up and you can baffle and you can see each other, and you can record and you can isolate things, solo things, and there's not a lot of leakage.
Yeah.
In a big rock sense, you're probably not going to get away with like an acoustic guitar on the floor. But there are booths and places to sequester amplifiers away from that to reduce like the leakage.
Yeah, well, you think about like seeing the movies of the Stones making Friend of the Devil. I mean, not Friend of the Devil. Sympathy for the Devil.
Yes.
Yeah, that time when they joined the Grateful Dead,
Yeah.
when they were making Sympathy for the Devil at Olympia, and it's just like,
Yeah.
it's just a big space, and then there's just big gobos separating instruments and drums and everything.
And the gobos aren't that thick.
But it was just like the sound just had enough space to go away.
Yeah.
And not come back into the other mics. Or maybe it did. Maybe it was just the right amount too.
Well, a lot of it becomes like the right balance of the band. The band's used to rehearsing. They weren't going to have like the sophistication of monitoring, which is probably probably like decrease the ability to develop the self-balancing thing as performers.
Just because you mean so much music is studio centric or stage centric?
I would say stage centric. Even like when you go to a live show, you go on the stage. It's rare that there's any sort of volume on a stage, and I don't know if that's made better.
Well, yeah, I mean,
rock performance, but you can hear yourself exactly the way you want. Right? Is that always beneficial? Like not being able to hear yourself and going, I'm so loud I can't hear anyone else, and pulling back, but still having the tone you want. You know, who is it in the list of great drummers that everyone always mentions? Who's that person?
Charlie?
Well, yeah, but Charlie was really like trained to how he was going to perform the drums. He came from a jazz background, so he would keep the hat off the snare. He wasn't bashing cymbals. He knew how to hit the heads and to get the tone. This is something that had like Motown drummers, R&B drummers of America had a huge influence on John Bonham. So, you know, in rock and roll, people talk about a big drum sound, and you probably have listened to those isolated drums. And you know, audience, you should listen to this. He would balance himself. There were minimal mics. Some of the earlier records are just like maybe 1, 2, 3 mics down to one track. And then that was Glenn, and then Andy went into more mics, and you listen to some of the Andy Johns records, you can hear basically nonlinear reverb, but it's actually like delaying rooms with gates, so that the room got that sound that now you can pull up in any sort of reverb plug-in and go to nonlinear. You could put a pre-delay in it. There were ways to do that. The delay was the distance of the room mic from the sound source. How you opened up the pattern and captured that would give you the RT, give you the reverb time, how you could place a gate on that and key it from like a kick or a snare or whatever, and have it open, have that room audio open up and close. You know?
Yeah. Well, and the cool thing about especially drummers playing at that self-directed dynamic and volume is, and with any acoustic instrument, I guess any electric guitar as well, but is that ability to turn the mic pre up more, and there's more room for excitement in the sound. I remember it was a T-Bone Burnett quote once that I heard that said like the secret to a great sounding record. His quote was, play quietly and turn the mic pre's way up, and it does. You notice that when you record records yourself and you mix things and you're like, why is that? Why does that broken down song sounds so loud on my record, but the loud song sounds, far away. And then you start having to figure out how to turn the broken down song, the acoustic song or whatever, you have to turn it down in the mastering so it's not overpowering the loud songs on a record.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of truth to that. And it's important for the musicians to hear that sound in their headphone mix. So they will they'll pull back on subdivision because they know that it's going to be filled with the actual sound of the performance. And if they want to do subdivision, you can do that as an overdub. You can pull back the pre's and go to more close mics and kind of blend that in, since tracks aren't like an issue anymore. I think that the gained up mic pre's and getting more tone in the drums actually led to hey, let's do the cymbals as an overdub, which,
Did you get much experience messing with that idea?
Oh yeah, lots.
You
Yeah.
did?
Yeah. The thing is if you're that gained up, and someone is hitting their normal velocity onto a cymbal, it just craps out the whole sound. And then you're trying to get like a balance. And I like to have the drummer play like where they want the cymbals, and I try and hit like a middle. I didn't do this earlier, and you end up with that part of the song that is more down, that has a great sound. And then when it gets to the part where everybody's supposed to be creating the wall of emotion for the listener, it craps out all the thresholds on the compressors and it gets really small.
Yeah.
So there was, especially in the that era of rock, mid 90s to mid 2000s, and that where people were riding on crashes all the time.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God. I listened to records that I've done in that era, and I'm just like, oh, that was not the thing.
Yeah, that's funny that you bring these things up, because these were all things I wanted to ask you about. The presence of cymbals on records, and just that idea of overtaking the higher frequencies, the 1K up kind of information, and what does that do to your records? Let me see, how did I ask this? I don't even know where my question is here. Oh no, here it is. Leaving room for high EQ. Some of the records in your discography, which Rockstars, of course, we've included in the show notes, so please scroll down. You can go listen to a bunch of Joe's great records that he's done. But you've done work with Keith Urban, Long Hot Summer. I was listening to that track, and what struck me about it was his voice is there. It's obviously meant to be a featured lead. That's what you're supposed to be listening to. It's got the detail. I think he also maybe sings in a slightly lower register. If I was picking up on that, I'm not sure what the note was, but the acoustics were kind of dark in a cool way. It's like I immediately noticed that the instruments are not competing for that front center. And that's that whole topic. It's like when you've got drums with crazy cymbals, or you've even got guitars that have lots of sizzle on top, everything just starts competing for your attention, and your ear. And I wonder if you want to talk a little more about that too. Just stuff you learned about, I guess not screwing up a record.
Yeah. Sadly, I don't remember Long Hot Summer.
Well, it's all right. I mean, it's, and it's just the, sometimes my playlist might get one track that was on the same record,
Oh no, it's all good. But there are those songs like Never Coming Down. And it's going to have like a raucous vibe. So people are gonna be bashing around in it. And it's the use of filters before boost and cut.
Right.
I mean, although filters are a cut, an attenuation, it's about what do I want this to sound like? And then you're looking at that microphone choice, and you're looking at that preamp gain. And hopefully, you've made the right microphone choice, and you're just able to manipulate what it is you what the performer is looking to convey in the performance.
Sometimes you just don't know what's coming next. Sometimes you don't know before the tracking where you're headed.
That's the truth. But it usually reveals itself in the first couple of takes, like rundowns.
Yeah.
And you have to be ready for that first one to be the one, but that doesn't happen that often. But if it does happen, it's okay, because maybe not everything's perfect, but being able to have that first approach at something is the right thing. But generally, you get like indicators of what's going to happen and what you're doing that's going to probably be divisive to the outcome, and then you got to start adjusting. I don't like a lot of information going on overheads. Sometimes as far down as 7.5K, filtering low pass filter like minus 6 dB per octave, or setting that point between 7.5 and 10.5, or that depends on the song. And then the sharper version of that, probably more like 5K to 7.5K for like toms. I don't want any of that information for that on the toms. Even on a snare drum, I don't really want like a lot of 10K up on the actual snare top. So, and you're going to find that shelf, that high open shelf, from other things.
Interesting. So the snare mic itself, you're saying, wouldn't necessarily have the high shelf boost, or
no?
So that information just creeps in other ways.
Yeah, I kind of feel like combination of different things you've been shown, or you've listened to on podcast, or you've read about, or the lore of recording. I like that everyone's version of having a mic 3 feet above the snare from the Beatles, right? So you start getting into that, and what's going to be a good mic for that one. It's different from your overheads. You might have some sort of like mid-side version, like where you have a ribbon in figure 8 in the center, and then you might have like some 67s or 87s on that to give you sort of like a side width. That's one way. I prefer like a Blumline ribbon for the overhead, and then I like to go to either a pencil condenser, or I have a hot rod TLM 193 that's basically if they would have made like a 3/4 inch diaphragm 67.
Mm-hmm.
I use that, or I'll use like a Sony C30.
And this is up high where that Blumline figure 8 mic is above the drum kit, but looking down pointed at the snare.
Yeah, try and fit it in an area that's in the null of the figure 8s from the Blumline, and generally cardioid and 3 to 4 feet above the snare and hat, and then make sure that you have the best phase correlation
between the Blumline and that mic too. They'd probably be
and the kit,
right next to each other in a way.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things too that phase invert is your friend. Like go into mono. What do the rooms sound like added in? What do the toms sound like? What do the overheads sound like? How is all this affecting the kick and snare? Am I getting the snare forward and the kick forward? Do they have body, or is it back and diminished?
Yeah.
And what's more appropriate?
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you say that, because I've noticed that when I'm checking phase polarity on drum mics, sometimes, you try both ways and you're like, neither one seems like an obvious right answer. And then you wonder, you're like, should I just make a taste call in this situation, or am I somehow way off base? But it sounds like you're reminding us that sometimes you might decide that pushing the sound of the drum back in the mix a little bit by the phase, maybe it's got a deeper, more low end in there or something, but it sounds pushed back, because I've experienced that sometimes.
Yeah.
Or having it come forward, even if the low lows aren't the biggest out of the two options,
Yeah, and it really like where the bass is going to be, where the other instruments, the polyphonic instruments, where they're going to be, that kind of is going to like dictate that choice. But like harmonically, if you get the right gain staging and you get the right phase correlation, then you're going to start hearing like octaves that are actually in the range. You're going to hear like maybe you're getting a subharmonic. Or you're getting like a higher open than actually what's going on in your normal perception of what you do. Player,
cool.
distance, all that.
Look, if you're like me, then you love having cool instruments in your studio, right? No matter what style of music you make, Native Instruments gives your studio all the instruments and sounds you need, from drums, loops, and beats to the coolest synthesizers, realistic strings, guitar amps, and futuristic synth pads. I love recording and tracking real bands in my studio, but then adding awesome overdubs from Contact, Massive X, Super 8, Battery, Guitar Rig, and Hybrid Keys, for example. Use the code ROCK10 now to get 10% off. Or get Complete Start for free today with a bundle of 2,000 sounds and 6 gigs of samples, all over at nativeinstruments.com. Very cool. I'm going to say that one more time just in case the rock stars weren't getting that. So this concept of getting the bright out of this from the snare drum, if I'm hearing you right, Joe, the close mic on the drum, maybe we're not hyping it up a ton on the top because we've got this small diaphragm mic that's up above the drum kit right next to where the stereo Blumline ribbon mic is. And the ribbon mic is probably looking down at the drum kit where sort of the left is looking over towards the hi-hat a little bit and the right is looking down towards the ride, and it's hitting all the cymbals. And then because it's a Blumline, the left, right of the back of the mic is pointed up towards the ceiling and the open space. And you're getting that as well. And if I remember correctly, will the Blumline give us more of a proximity effect on what it's picking up than just an XY? If we had, I guess the ribbon, it won't give us that option, but a condenser mic would let us maybe select between stereo cardioid versus stereo Blumline.
Yeah, so if you did it with like 67s or 87s as opposed to a ribbon, the proximity like of like a bass boost, maybe it depends on the actual like choice between those microphones, but more localization. The Blumline gives you great localization.
Oh, okay, cool.
And so does like a Decca tree.
Oh, Decca tree. Would you ever put a Decca tree vertical, pointing down at a drum kit?
I wouldn't be opposed to it. I like the Decca as a room mic.
Now that we said it, we have to try it, right?
Yeah, you got to try it. I like the Decca tree for the room because you can kind of capture that 10 to 12 foot distance
with drums?
From the drums, yeah. It was particularly for the drums. You can get that distance. I don't like to go high like the traditional orchestra. Mm-hmm. So the Decca tree in the orchestra sessions, that's above the conductor's head and usually right in front of the conductor. So as the conductor is hearing the balance, as he's conducting and balancing the orchestra through the chart, you're kind of capturing like a giant head.
Yeah.
And left, right, center. Center's forward, and you're back about almost 5 feet, and the distances from the back microphones is generally about 6.5 feet. And you could do the sides in figure 8, but traditionally a Decca is all omnis.
Yeah, and would that make sense in a small room at all, or a medium room, or is it really just appropriate in a bigger room? I've never even tried a Decca tree myself.
It depends on how small the room is. So if the room is large enough for you to get that center mic, 6 feet off of the kick, then you're going to be 11 feet back to the side mics now up against walls. But I'm not opposed to that. Because you can find corners, which are acoustical spaces that lots of people try to take out. But when you're talking about drums and that sort of like compression and reflection that you can get on a figure 8 or an omni, it can be useful. So it really just depends on the player.
Yeah,
and if you have enough space.
Fun experiment to try. And then if we want to experiment with a Decca tree, we don't have to have a Decca tree, bar or something like
No.
that. We could just use 3 mic stands.
Yeah,
and
I just
try and
use it on
position them
3
right.
stands. Yeah. The
Yeah.
bar is more from a single point of getting the height and having everything up like that. So,
Yeah. Okay. And then remind us one last time of the distance between the mics for our Decca. Does that matter so
So
much?
the center mic is you create the point from the sound source that you want, whatever that distance is. So once you create that point, you would go back. I think it's just under 5 feet. And then that would be your center point on the back line for the sides. From that center point, I go 3 foot 3 inches left, 3 foot 3 inches right. And that's where I place the stands. So center, back 4 foot 11, point, measure 3 foot 3 inches, put your right side back to the center point and the side back line 3 foot 3 inches for the left, and then place those. Then you start listening. People will do different things.
And what's the cosine over the tangent of all 3?
Yeah,
Come on, professor.
Come on now. I'll have to get you another professor for that, and they could answer.
That's cool, man. Now I got to go try that out.
Yeah, omni in the front, and then omni in the sides and the back. But sometimes
I thought it was business in the front, party in the back.
Yeah, that is. It depends on what decade. But
we went from decatries to decades.
Yeah, decades. I like that. Man, look out, people. Dad jokes are starting to happen.
Hey, as I was told on this podcast, are you a dad? Yeah. Then it's just a joke.
It's just a joke. All right, good. I like it. Yeah, figure 8 on those on the back sides is a cool thing, and you can actually kind of tilt them out maybe 10, 15 degrees, and you get more width.
Oh, cool.
From your figure 8. So
that's cool.
Rock stars, give it a shot.
Definitely got to try that
if you got the space.
Well, let's just stay on that topic for a sec. Give some cool ideas for other room mic things to try in a home studio setting. Consider a home studio might be like a medium, a small rooms. Maybe give both. Maybe if you got a small room idea, and a medium room, but assuming a home room isn't like a really big space.
Well, there's lots of different things that you can add to that depending on what the song from a small room standpoint. If you can get even like a space pair in like figure 8s in a shallow room. So in my head, I'm thinking of the side hallway of the castle and setting drums there against the glass. You only have maybe from the back to the other wall 8 feet, but it's probably about 20 feet. It's a 8 foot by 20 foot rectangle.
Right.
So you're facing shallow in the center of that at like the 10
but the
foot
sides
point.
are the longest distance away from the drums.
Longest distance. And you could put figure 8s there. Now you have these, SPL made a great thing called Transient Designer. You can get a hardware piece. It had a digital algorithm and how it worked. So the plugin is great as well. And it's in UAD and it's also in Plugin Alliance. So you could take those room mics after capturing those, and you could put the SPL Transient Designer on those. Now, if you take, it's a 2-knob plug-in. So literally the top is basically, it's like upward expansion into limiting. So you can take the transient, it'll detect the transient, and you can remove the transient. So you don't have in a small room all of those really hard hits on those mics that are space pair wide. Then you can elongate the release of the limiting that is taking place. Now, all of a sudden, you have like an ambience and a width in a small space that sounds like a larger room. That works out really well. That's
hip. And I need to, I haven't been practicing that much lately, remembering to check out Transient Designers or any transient plugin on those room and ambient mics on a drum kit where you kind of do wish you had more control. A lot of times I might do what we probably all do, which is compress it more, but that doesn't always do the trick. And sometimes that brings up those screaming cymbals in a way that starts to drive you nuts too. So,
True.
it's funny, like balancing drums, and you just got to kind of push a lot of things around until you start to discover how these things are going together on this particular song, right?
It's true. There's a lot more tools available to engineers now. So if you get a good capture, you don't have to do it all in the capture. And I'm telling my younger self this, because you can get to an end and you want it to be different, but you painted yourself in a corner so far that it's just wet paint. It's just going to be messy if you try and change it. But you don't have to do that. And you can elongate the rooms, or you could duplicate those rooms as well. And with the transient designer, you can push the transient, and then you can remove the release. So it actually is like it upward expands the transient, but it ducks the release.
And you hear more of the whack of the drum and less of the space around it.
Yeah. And so the distance from the actual hits to the room mics in time, just from the time arriving, becomes more apparent in the sound. So you can literally, with your room mics, create a slapback.
Oh, that's cool.
Another
good thing to try out, Rockstars.
Yeah, and you could use like, all of the DAWs have like a time adjuster. So if you put that in the front, you can slide it back in time or samples
till you get just what you want
to get it even further back. There's so many options in any space. If you have the luxury of like a larger room.
Mm-hmm.
And you're capturing that in the drums, you can hyper compress that, and then you can use different parts of the drum kit. I'm thinking kick, snare, and toms in a very either strip silence or hard gating, and then send those into a key on those room mics that you have captured. So they're
open up quick, right?
They open up quick, which is that sort of later Zeppelin.
A little bit,
yeah, the later Zeppelin into Phil Collins on a Peter Gabriel solo record, into Phil Collins, into everything, into Power Station, where they were doing that with the room mics, but dropping them an octave. I mean, there's so many ways that you could do that. You can create gated signal.
Well, let me add to that. Rockstars, don't forget to let the band play the song, though. That's the only trick when we get into all the cool stuff.
Yeah. And they might go, this is absolutely atrocious and totally destroying my performance. So
right, they might not like it. That's why it's good to get to those things quick, too, and find out.
And you have the luxury of... you don't have to listen to it when you're performing. So you could create new tracks with the same input and an entirely different process. And a lot of this is, if you're doing it in a smaller studio situation, you're going to want to create these things in a different manner to where it's not causing a lot of latency in the performance. So you can't really do it. So you've got to get the best sound, the best transparent capture that you can then go extreme, and you still have the ability to go light. That doesn't mean that you don't capture like trash mics or really radical things as well. Same thing. You can create like different inputs to where the microphone and the capture doesn't have all of the analog equipment inserted.
Yeah.
So that you have both simultaneous. You can create parallel compression on an actual analog board and then capture that, or an echo chamber if you have the luxury of being in like Sound Emporium A or Blackbird A or D, or some of the other rooms that have echo chambers. You can grab the echo chamber and you can manipulate it differently.
The S Series by Atom Audio, crafted in Berlin, is a flagship line of reference monitors, blending advanced engineering and in-house design. With 5 models in various sizes and configurations, these monitors build on Atom Audio's iconic heritage while incorporating new technology for improved acoustic performance. The range includes the compact S2V with the 7-inch woofer, the 3-way S3H with twin 7-inch woofers, the vertical S3V with a single 9-inch woofer, and the powerful S5H and S5V main monitors featuring a 12-inch woofer and exceeding 131 dBSPL per pair. Despite differences in size and power, all these models provide highly analytical sound for professional audio applications. The S Series includes new woofers, mid-range drivers, redesigned waveguides, and a DSP engine for crossover optimization. The result is accurate frequency response, consistent dispersion, enhanced detail in bass and mid frequencies with wider frequency ranges, and forward-looking digital connectivity, all in a durable design. The S Series ensures longevity in your studio, backed with a 5-year guarantee at atomaudio.com. I am massively impressed with iZotope Ozone. I've been mastering a lot of my records recently, and Ozone makes it so easy for me to get a fantastic sound. The mastering assistant will help you get started by measuring your track and suggesting all the settings you need for a professional result based on the genre and EQ curve of your choice. You can even reference a specific song if you want, using simple yet sophisticated modules like clarity, impact, low-end focus, stabilizer, imager, exciter, and spectral shaping, along with powerful dynamic EQ, compression, and limiting. You simply adjust the settings to your own taste, and it sounds incredible. And the magic of master rebalance means you can reach into your mix at the mastering stage and manipulate the vocal, bass, and drums. My bandmates are pretty demanding of my mixes, but now when I send off the masters for approval and get comments back like, "Holy bleep, pristine, damn good mastering, crystal clear, you're a wizard, finally I love my singing, and the drums and bass sound huge," well then I know I'm doing something right. So check out the newest Ozone, RX, and all the other great apps at iZotope.com and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off. Yo, rock stars. We're back now for the jam session, or otherwise known as the second half of the show. I'm here in Studio C with Joe Baldridge at Ocean Way Nashville. Joe, you ready to jam? Jam.
I'm ready to jam.
Sweet, man.
Whoa.
Come on, jam. There you go. That was good, man. That was right on the money.
I put the stinger.
You're a listener, I can tell. So you started to hit at something that I think is well, I'd be curious if you think it's an issue or not an issue, but it's the latency question. And it's not the question of like, oh, latency is frustrating because how do you bring the latency down on your computer? It's the question of, did we lose something instinctive about record making by switching to the computer and having to deal with latency, by the fact that, you know, if you don't have a mixer, you're not going to just use the send knob, send it over to a guitar pedal, blend it back in, and get that accidental funky sound on the way in. What are some thoughts you have about that? Do you think that recording tracks directly into the computer will ever be able to just process them with plugins and not have latency? Do you think we need to be smart and include analog in our setups so that we can, you know, blend mics together on the way in and create a sound before it hits the computer?
I think it's all of that. Like I just don't know that like people starting in audio now and maybe even back 8 years are going to have this sort of luxury of experience of having the ability to create analog signal chains and then capture them in a DAW. I don't know that that's necessarily all bad because I'm biased because I have that experience, and
Yeah.
I was very much into. If you listen in that playlist, there's a lot of temporal processes going on.
Yeah.
I would just always gravitated towards that.
Well, as I recall, you would show up for a session and Cartage would bring in racks of all kinds of cool, sound making toys. That would be, guitar heads
Yeah.
down to whatever else you might have.
Lots of phasers, flangers, choruses, panners with modulations, delays, like all that sort of thing. And I feel like that was a whole group of like-minded individuals at that point that were doing that as well. Everyone sort of, in that sense, you kind of had your own thing inside of a very similar thing.
Yeah.
Whereas I think one of the things that you have to be wary of as an audio creator now is just using all of the same things in the same
we've all got
manner.
The same plugins or whatever. They're great, but
yeah, they're great. But just because you can isn't necessarily reason to do the same thing that everyone is doing. But there is a balance to that of having to put a twist on it, but not be so different. It really depends on what the artist is trying to do. I feel like in the capture, if you can split signal, back to what we were talking about with room mics and small studios, mid-sized studios, just trying to create something, some vibe, for lack of a better description. There are many ways to do that. You can split signal and you can record those. You could get that sound up. You can even do it with a send inside of a DAW to like what would be an instrument track or an aux input track, and you can create that chain, and you're going to hear it better with less latency, especially if that chain is native plugins to the system, as opposed to more complicated written algorithms that are going to grab a lot of CPU and cause a lot of latency.
Mm-hmm.
So you can sort of create chains that give you the thing that you want, but without using like high processing plugins. After it's captured.
You mean like if you're using the DSP plugins that come with Pro Tools, they're going to be very low.
Yeah, low latency.
A lot of them.
Yeah.
Right, but I guess the challenge there is if it's a time delay plugin, then you're getting away with that even with native ones a lot of times because the delay is that's what you wanted. Although it's a good reminder that
it'll change after it's recorded.
Right. Once you press play and you play it back, it's going to be a slightly different delay.
It's going to be a different time, yeah.
So that thinking and realizing that can be a good reason to sometimes set up internal routing in the computer so that you're actually printing it to another track so that if you hear what you like when it happened, it's printed.
Yes.
Which was what was so much fun about recording with all the outboard stuff in the first place, pedals and everything. You just turned it and you're like, holy shit, that was great.
Yeah, and there's lots of really great like pedal design now with like computer control. So you can create a separate chain with a pedal that is actually digital outside of a DAW that is analog and could be captured as audio from a direct or whatever, and have that simultaneous. The same way that if you have the ability to go through analog compression or things like this, you can capture that, but you can also then recreate it afterwards with maybe that sound in addition to a more extreme sound or a less extreme sound. You have all that flexibility. When we were recording, it was limited and destructive to what you could afford to have as your multi-track. It could be 24. It could be, when I started on an 8-track, right?
Yeah. I mean, ADATs were the key to the kingdom for me.
Yeah, 8s.
Over at Alex the Great,
Yeah. And then you could go further and you could, maybe we're at 24 or at 32 or at 48. Oh my gosh.
But it's a good reminder when you say a splitter. I mean, Rockstars, if you even just think, a studio that's got mics and interface and stuff like that, even just like a little DI box, a radial or one of those, or just whoever makes something where you can plug the mic in and split it out to two outputs, or go to the mic pre and then split the output of that to two outputs, gives us that ability to start doing more than one thing at once, which could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, you have a dynamic mic, which isn't going to need phantom power. So you could have your optimum hi-fi chain for whatever it is, an acoustic guitar or voice, I'm thinking, or drums. But you could have in the same position a dynamic, or you could have a small diaphragm condenser if you have an external phantom power supply.
Yeah, I have a PV one that's just a phantom power box because I think some of my mic pre's didn't have phantom power.
Didn't have phantom, right? And you want to use those if you have a ribbon, because always having phantom across a mic pre isn't healthy for the old ribbon. So, but yeah, you could set up like a microphone on a voice or an acoustic, and then you could also have a dynamic mic, and you basically create an XLR to a 1/4 inch. And you could go through pedals and then an amp in another room, like some of my favorite vocal sounds.
So like double miking, in other words.
Correct, yeah. So you have the clean channel, but you have the ability to capture and blend in like a Fender with a really deep tremolo with some drive on it, with a little bit of delay, with a little bit of the spring reverb, and then have that mic'd.
Now, here's an interesting thing. I was just thinking about how similar to recording a DI on a bass and then miking the amp, and you discover that the time difference starts to create comb filtering between the two signals. That would also be true for the vocal, but I guess you could simply do this. If you looked at the mic that you use to record the amp, so you have a dynamic on the voice, it goes to an amp through pedals, and then you're miking up the amp, unless you're going to record it directly into Pro Tools. But if you're miking the amp, now you've got that little bit of a distance from the cone to the mic on the amp. And you could just take the clean mic on the voice and scoot it back the same distance from the dynamic mic that he's singing into or she's singing into, and that might line them up for you.
Yes. Yeah, and there's many different sort of like time adjustment plugs that you can audition that before you actually commit to sliding the whole thing. There's lots of different options with that. Sometimes the filtering is actually a benefit.
Right.
And the other thing that I've learned at this point is cool sounds don't have to be on all the time. It was like I used to tell a performer, like, you can do that, but if you do it 12 times in the song, it's not special. But if you pick the right moment and then you return to it just a little bit later for a moment, that's going to be like more of a
memorable
wow.
moment.
Yeah. Wow. Look what they're doing. If you do it 12 times in a song, then it's just.
Think about special effects in music, rock stars, like tourism. If you live there, it's not special and you never go. But if you visit it one time, it really blows you away.
True. Yeah. True.
Okay, so let's pivot from that to and then let me add to this. Remember, Dave Palmer from the Rorys, remember from back when we were making those the Sponge Bath records. So that was one of the things he always did, was he did two mics, and he like comb filtered out his voice, and he always loved that. And that was the first time I ever said, like, or just discovered that idea, like, oh, it could be a good thing.
Yeah.
It could be a cool sound.
Did that a lot early on. Did some of it in Walk the West, took that into DC Talk. Ron Sexsmith, great singer-songwriter artist from Toronto.
That's right.
Took it into Keith Urban. You just know when it's the right thing to like put that in. It adds an extra sort of movement to the vocal performance or that. Yeah. Good stuff.
Did you record Secret Heart? Or did you guys do a version of that? For Ron Sexsmith?
Yeah. The main thing I remember about Secret Heart was that there was the version by the producer and engineer of the entire first album. That was a complete vision. But the label had a motivation for another great Canadian producer engineer to do a version of that song. And it was presented in a manner of, we'll do that and that will be on the record. So there was a sticking point with the artist, Ron, and management that they didn't want to disrupt what had been created as an entire thought. And it was basically stalling it from being released. And I had the idea of like include it as a bonus track. And if they want to release and exploit it, then people buy the album and they hear the other version. They like both versions. It's a great song. What's the problem?
Beautiful song.
Yeah. Speaking with Angels, there's a lot on that first record. And that was the compromise that greenlighted the production being created and then the record being released. So you never know, like
that's great.
Offhanded 10 seconds and then, hey, why didn't we think of that? But we did a lot for, we did an entire recording in between the first and second record that a lot of people became ingrained in their mind that was the definitive version, which complicated it for the first record's producer and engineer when they went to make the record, which, I mean, it was a nice problem to create. So I still love some of those, like Almost Always and a song called So Young.
Yeah.
They've trickled out in different rarities that you can find. I think I have.
Was that the time of Lebanon, that song also?
Lebanon's first record.
Record.
And I remember the demo of that too. Ron's a singer-songwriter.
Yeah.
And he's just brilliant. But has a very strong vision. That was in between the first.
Great vibrato.
Oh, amazing! He's a jazz singer. He's never on the beat. He's around it. He's a crooner. He's like a Sinatra.
Yeah.
But that was I introduced Ron to Brad.
Right on.
Yeah.
And Brad played bass on.
And harmonium and a whole bunch of stuff. And we had a good time. We did that at a studio in Berry Hill called Treasure Isle. And then we had folks like coming in just wanting to play. So Al Perkins came in and played some stuff, and Al Cooper came in and played, which I thought was really funny because we were like, let's get Al Cooper to come over and play B3. All Al Cooper wanted to do was play guitar. Then we found out that he was actually a guitar player who stumbled upon the B3 because Dylan asked him to put on a B3 overdub, and he had never played a B3, but he, obviously he had the talent to wing it, and his winging it is like classic.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, let me see here. I was going to continue on the computer topic for a moment by asking you just point blank, can we mix in the DAW in the computer?
Well, I don't think anyone mixes the other way.
Yeah, nobody mixes the other way anymore.
There's so many different things happening. Like,
and I asked that in the context of the studio we're in. You have the Avid S3 over there, I think.
Yeah,
is that right? And just that whole marriage of mixing in the computer feel like borrowing from mixing on a console for the places where it really can help.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that you're going to encounter working with very many people, artists included at this point, that actually understand the actual process of mixing, to where they're not, if you wanted to do it purely on a desk analog, then you would have to have an artist who had a strong opinion of working that way and understood it. And I don't think that you're going to find that. That's a very special case. And those are awesome records. But in general, if you do that, you are now a part of the continual comment revision.
Right.
And unless you have the clout to say, no, the mix is the mix, and let's give people a chance to hear it, and people go with that's a difficult thing to traverse.
Now, I pointed to the Avid. I know upstairs you also have the
SSL
Origin,
Yeah.
and then maybe you have that the center section. I think had room for the UF8 and controllers and stuff like that. And you're teaching a master mixing class, so I should spend less time talking and ask you the questions and just like have you tell us some of the stuff that you're teaching in that. Like, what are some of the first things you need? I mean, if it's the advanced class, maybe you're not doing the beginner questions, but what are some of the things that you're teaching the students in terms of EQ compression and just ways to navigate with the computer? And because I feel like navigation is a huge part of mixing for me. It's like a mental map of where is all this stuff and
Right.
what am I thinking about and how do I adjust it in this moment?
It all comes down to the computer. If you have the ability to understand an analog system, and I truly mean if you really want to do this for a long time, you're going to have to understand an analog system of how one thing can go multiple places, So one phone call could become a conference call, could become a Zoom meeting, could become a capture that's actually in like a series or a film. Like it's the same thing. If you can understand signal routing and gain structure, and you work to get that understanding through analog systems, then you're going to be able to transfer that and do a multitude of larger type of projects with different outcomes in a digital system. And then you have to look at are we capturing it? And if we're in a digital system of converting a performance to digital, if I use Dante, then I'm introducing more latency than if I'm using MADI. So you have a greater possibility of being connected digitally with MADI for performances to line up with tempo and subdivision than with Dante. But if it's already recorded and I want to move it around to a lot of different places and process it, then you're going to be looking at Dante, and this is going to be more of what you have in a live format, or if you have in a broadcast or immersive environment, it's going to be Dante. But if I'm trying to get the audio, have it converted to digital, then manipulate it to broadcast, and it's being performed, then I'm probably going to opt for MADI.
What do songwriters, music producers, DJs, EDM, TV, and film composers all have in common with you and me? We all need incredibly cool sounds that instantly transport the music we are creating to the style that we want. This is why Native Instruments is your ultimate toolkit with a massive library of sounds for your studio. Whether you want to create hip-hop, indie pop, classic rock, meditation music, pumping dance floor beats, or full orchestral arrangements, Native Instruments' Complete Bundle offers you everything you need, from drums, loops, and beats to wild synths, ultra-realistic strings, and vintage electric bass, guitars, and keys. The list goes on and on. I personally love recording real bands in my studio and then adding cool drum samples, synths, and futuristic keys from Battery, Contact, Massive X, Guitar Rig, and Hybrid keys, for example. Plus, it's a great way to make your productions sound modern and unique. Use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off or get Complete Start for free today with a bundle of 2,000 sounds and 6 gigs of samples over at nativeinstruments.com. I noticed that AVB wasn't mentioned there. Is that one not being used in as many of those situations, or
not that I'm aware of? It might be, but not that I'm aware of. We have a lot of
these are all Rockstars. In case you weren't familiar with these are all different digital formats for routing a bunch of signals from one place to another.
Yeah,
and they'll all go over Ethernet, or no? Maddie's different, right?
Coax.
Yeah. Which takes us all the way back to ADAT light pipe, which still rocks the world, man.
Yeah.
That's amazing to me that format is still
It
going
had
strong.
clock. It was stable.
It went into every interface. It was like a gimme for any company to say, we've got 24 ins and outs. You just have to use 2 extra ADATs on it.
Yes. Yeah. There's it really depends on what it is that you want to do in audio. If you want to create recorded audio and mix it and have it out there for an audience to come to, you can just listen to things and create something and go through all of your errors to get to a place to where it works. If you're very willing to take in critique and adjustments, which is something that you probably should get used to if you want to be in it for a long time. But you're also going to have to know when you're losing the essence of what you're doing and be able to be that voice in the process. Either I'm not the right person because I'm not comfortable with this being that way, or I think we're kind of losing the plot. Mm-hmm. Those are kind of the bookends of that.
And that primarily comes from working with others.
Yes.
Although it can come from working with yourself too.
It can, because you can go, what was I thinking? I think I saw interview Vance Powell said, as a producer, engineer, mixer, as a producer, I should have fired the mixer. And just as you laughed, that resonated. Like, that's really true. Like you just crawl inside it and lose.
I do that all the time.
I'm not saying Vance. I think that he was alluding to that point, but certainly for me, that's what resonated. You lose the plot when it's just yourself. You got to have outside input. But the other thing is you also have to have some sort of artistic vision to where when too many comments begin to unravel what it is you're trying to create. So no one's going to like it. If you don't like it and you want me to change it that much, no one's going to like that thing.
Right.
I'm not the right person for this.
Thinking that the change, even if we arrive at the ultimate change, nobody's going to like it when we get there. So what's the point?
Yeah, everyone's going to walk away from it. So how's an audience going to come to it?
Yeah, and I think a good question sometimes to help us remember, to ask and help us arrive at a decision when it's revision time is, if we make these changes, are people going to actually like the song better? If they don't like the song now?
Right.
Because that's always an interesting way to think about it too. It's like, maybe you just don't like the singer, or maybe you just don't like the song.
There's a lot of truth to that. I mean, that it is a question that you have to remind yourself to ask. I used to say it a bit different. Like, is this idea really worth this amount of time?
Well,
from the beginning of recording a song, if the song's not coming across, maybe it's not the song's time. It doesn't mean that it won't be 2 records from now or 3 records from now, but it's just, do we really need to invest in making this something that we all react to if we're doing it and none of us are reacting just because we can?
Yeah. And I guess the flip side the other end of the spectrum on that is also preparing ourselves, steeling ourselves for a life in music where get ready to do a shit ton of work on stuff that just goes right in the garbage can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's part of the process, isn't it?
It is part of the process. Audio professionals, you have the ability to keep everything, and you might have a different vision over time, and then you can go back to that day. If you make a serious turn from an early direction that you were reacting to. So it's smart for you to know at this point, I was liking where this was going, but then we went somewhere completely different. So
Yeah.
It could be the next record, and you could go back to that, and you could either build upon that or take it as direction to go a different place. If an idea peters out, is it a bad idea, or is it just not time for that idea?
Yeah, I've definitely rediscovered things and made them work later. And then also just that prompts an idea of the question of like, when is it good to print a mix? Maybe in the moment where you're just feeling good. At any moment you're feeling great, just print it, because you might come back later, and it's so easy to lose stuff. I remember the first time I was working on a record with Will Kimbrough, actually, and we were working hard. I was, mixing, tweaking, using the new mic modeler plugin from Antares, and trying to find the right vocal mic and all these kind of things. And then I went back to the car, and we still had to burn CDs and then pop them in and out. And I listened to the rough mix, and I was like, holy shit, that sounds so much better than what I just did, weeks later in the studio, and discovering that, and the importance of holding on to all these iterations while you're working so that you can go back and go, why was that so much better?
Yeah.
What did I do?
And hint, a really good thing to do in the world that we're in right now is name that session and name that bounce the same thing.
Yep. And Pro Tools, if you're listening, and every other DAW manufacturer also have a save and lock feature in the file menu, so that when you save it, or when you do save as, it actually locks the session you just had, so that you won't open it and accidentally make a tweak before you do your save as, because I do that all the time. I'm like, oh crap, I just changed the mix.
If you've done that enough, you've then learned that you go through session file backups and see when you readdressed it and when that started occurring, and that's not the day when you actually liked it, and then you are saved.
Yeah. Is that before or after you go into preferences and tell Pro Tools 10 session file backups is not nearly enough? We should bump that up to 20 or 50.
Yeah. Save it every 5 minutes.
Yeah. And then here's another little ninja tip, rock stars. Don't leave your session up on the computer screen when you take the lunch break or go to do something else, because it just blasted over all your session file backups with the same copy of the session.
Right.
Because it's just sitting there. It'll all be the same.
There idling.
It's gone now.
It's time for me to save. Time for me to save.
All right, so we might be digressing slightly, but I'm getting some great takeaways. Your careful reply, you talked about going through errors and mistakes to arrive at figuring out how to do stuff. You talked about also interacting and being willing to get feedback from people. And I think underlying that is your implication that you're accepting that everybody's version of like what it means to make a record, they might start out in the classroom together, but 10 years later, they might all have different pathways towards like what does it mean to make a record the right way and to mix it the right way and all that kind of stuff. So it seems like it's good to understand that there's a lot of stuff we can learn, but we do have to go through the experience before we truly believe that this is the best way for me to make a record, and this way doesn't work. And along with that comes the idea of like creating templates for yourself and stuff. So I was curious if you teach, the concept of the importance of a template when you're working and arriving at a template. Do you feel like templates are custom for each mixer and producer that goes out there into the world?
I think that over time and workflow of having more workflow on different things will create a redundancy in processes that and then you're going to get to the place where I'm really kind of tired of building this. So you could have it as like a plug chain, and you could store that to where when you go to that, you can select it inside of Pro Tools or any other DAW, and then it automatically creates it. But beyond that, I like to look back at the signal flow of an analog desk, and you had control faders that went to a master fader. I like
those would be the VCAs on an SSL.
Correct. Yeah. Or, they actually had audio flowing through them at other iterations of that console. But yeah, in the beginning it was all VCAs, but you're looking at all that to be like zero and it go to a master. And, at different sorts of consoles, they actually had like maybe 3 submasters before the master. So you could assign multiple processes of versions of, sorry, running way far out in front.
No, it's
but
all
if
right.
you had like drums and bass and you wanted them to go to a submaster process that then combined in a master, you could do that analog. Like a lot of people had like broadcast consoles that were great mixing desks, so they could have an ABC limiting EQ curves, and they could send those control faders through those to a final master. I like to use that approach.
It's kind of the Michael Brower concept there too.
Definitely Brower is who I was imagining, but that wasn't just that. You can figure out different ways to do that with a bus matrix and different things.
So you're talking about, and I like that that you're talking about all this stuff in broad strokes.
Yeah.
So it's like groupings of instruments that are on their own faders going to some sort of master fader for that group, but then that might also go through 3 different colors on its way to the
final,
to the master.
Yes.
And you could be selective about that.
Yes. So all of your audio and all of its processes, which would be dynamics and EQ, and in the DAW world, you have gating, you have downward expansion, but you also have upward expansion. So if you get something that is too processed, you can expand the transients and then recompress it in a different manner. So those to say parallel compression isn't always true. Parallel dynamics. Right. So it could be compression. It could be limiting. Then you could have another thing that is actually expanding the transients and then sending at a different strength back into the compression or limiting. And this becomes your audio, which arrives to a control fader called drums. And then you just build out. You could have in your polyphonic instruments of keyboards or guitars, you could have parallel processes that create a width beyond stereo. Another thing to think about in this is when I'm sending something into a stereo image, then I need to have the send be positional. Otherwise, I'm sending it center into an image and expecting a result. And I'm just being ignorant because I don't understand that the position of the send is going to result in the position of the stereo image parallel process.
Right.
And I keep effects separate. And the luxury that we have is to find an effect that we really like for maybe drums, vocals, and some of the other instruments. But because we're in a DAW, I could take that effect and duplicate it and make a discrete input. So when I get into creating versions for an artist, a content owner, they're not going to have drum reverb on the vocals. Right? You can have them all go to the control faders or create separate sort of things. And then you can go into that ABC sort of colorization and how it combines into the final output.
What are some of the colorization things that come to mind for you when you think about setting that up? Are those sort of like EQ compression combinations where, like let's say the Pultec going into the Neve 33609 sounds great as a little combo, but then also sending it to some kind of Baxandall EQ with a SSL compressor also sounds good, and you're now blending the two together. I think of the Slate virtual compressor plugin kind of gave us that option too, where you could use more than one compressor at the same time.
Yeah. I will do maybe like a different sort of isolation. You basically are creating like a multi-band submaster. Now, whether that's compression, dynamics, or filtering, it becomes, or both. You can address low end in a different way, middle in a different way, and top in a different way, and you create these other sorts of excitement. And the combination of those to a master becomes like the outcome. I traditionally will try and do that more in the audio and then the control faders, and only arrive at one global submaster before a master, and that would generally probably only be like some sort of fast attack release, low ratio compression, and then possibly just a different sort of EQ. But the tools that are available for you right now are just phenomenal. There are so many different things that you can do.
Because we're now inside a computer where it's like you can route everything everywhere.
Yeah, and building upon like those sort of effects and recording, and then refining those after it's captured, and however that you're dealing with that and creating those processes, it opens up your color palette to so many different things. But from a technical aspects, Daryl Thorpe introduced me to Sound Radix, and just unbelievable. I took drums that I had recorded that I thought were great sounds, and I used Auto Align 2. Yeah. Auto Align 2 is like the jump from maybe you mentioned Antares to Celemony. It's like that kind of jump. But they made Auto Align. So, but the phase correlation and what you can make the target track inside of that Sound Radix plugin is phenomenal. Drum leveler, Surfer EQ,
these are all plugins I still need to get.
Oh my gosh. I would just encourage, they're really great people, and they're in Tel Aviv, and, by the time this comes out, hopefully there'll be peace, but, it's a great company to support, great people. The head of the company is, like an incredible, like acoustical physics brain that can code.
Kind of need to do that stuff, don't you?
Yeah, and he is he's just phenomenal, and Danny at that company, a great company, and their tools are awesome, and I'm forever indebted to Daryl Thorpe making the connection and becoming friends.
That's great
with them. The same thing with like Melodyne. We had the option to create a send and to change the pitch of the send before it went to the effect. Think about now, you could take a vocal and you could take a specific section of it, duplicate it, convert it to MIDI, then have it play an instrument and only have that instrument go to a reverb. And you have the ability to raise or lower the octave of that instrument that is sending into an ambience or a delay or a flange or any sort of reverberation or temporal process. These are all things that, used tastefully a little bit, create an incredible depth.
Right. This sounds like the secret to, or the trick to making vocals sound transformed into something, in a non-obvious way, or obvious if you want, but like in those ways where you hear it on songs, somebody holds a note out and you're like, God, it just sounds like almost like it morphed into a synth and keeps going.
Yes. And it did.
Yeah, exactly. It's cool. Yeah, it's cool. And then, some of those things also, I think it's a good reminder to us to give ourselves plenty of time to learn how to do those things. It's like you have to, you might know that it exists and that it might be a cool thing to do on a mix, but you don't necessarily want to bust it out for the first time on the mix that counts. You want to like start practicing all these little tricks so that when it
It's
does count.
appropriate,
You're like, I
yeah.
know how to get that going pretty quick, or set up a template track and just import it in, in
Yeah,
that moment.
there's a lot of truth to that because an idea has a freshness date when there are other people standing around. So if it takes you a
God.
minute and you're having to adjust it and it doesn't immediately do something cool, you're probably about to drown.
When I'm doing sessions with my friends in the studio and we're like cranking out 8 songs in a weekend, everything included, you really don't, if you can't just make it happen immediately, it just ain't going to happen
Yeah.
today,
Yeah. So we try to do that, in several different courses. The School of Music teaches a studio instrumentalist course here. There's a studio singer course that intermingles with the audio department. We have media and entertainment degree at Belmont, and those students are into podcasting. They're into documentary.
What's podcasting?
I don't know. I hear that people are really into it.
Some kind of weird shit.
It's what I do when I drive. It makes the Nashville traffic more tolerable. But we have these different sort of people with different interests that are crossing into different careers that you can do as audio. Just kind of looping back around. Like it's great to make music and stream music or whatever the engagement becomes for artistry. That is still where my passion lies. But there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do, and audio is a huge career. You just can't. If you think you can look back at the 22 gross from major labels was 26 billion, but audio creation in the same year was 104 billion and is expected to top 200 billion by 2026.
Wow.
And that means some of our good friends, they have very successful careers because they're doing audio in different forms. You can buy a ticket to a performance and stream that performance from a controlled environment, from a performance actually happening on stage in real time, or 70 to 100 milliseconds after it occurred, it's on your phone in another city. There's incredible advances in technology to where they are now creating devices that the audio is where it is occurring, but it can be controlled remotely in a controlled environment and then hit an app in less than 100 milliseconds.
Wow. Do you ever feel like the time that you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has gotten you nowhere? Have you been looking for a simple, straightforward, step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take you years to learn? What if you could have a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all your mixing struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is just for you. Now you can discover the proven step-by-step mix system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Listen to this quote from one of our students, David. Quote, "Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information and mentoring on the mix process that I've ever been a part of. That was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, but condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session." Close quote. Look, I'm so confident that this will take your mixes to the next level that if you can't get a killer mix within 30 days, I'll give you a full refund, no questions asked. So if you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and start now by checking out the free preview of the Ultimate Snare Mixing Trick. And I'll see you at the front row table of the Grammys. Cheers. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, the speed at which music and sound can zip around and get from one place to another is pretty cool. And it's fun to see it when it happens and it arrives on a more consumer level, because I always felt like, especially 2020 and stuff, it's like all of a sudden nobody had ever heard of Zoom, and all of a sudden everybody has heard of Zoom. It becomes like it becomes like the word Google or something.
Yeah.
But it still took a minute before the things that we cared about in sound starts to show up. So it's cool to see that the quality of audio is keep catching up with the quality of video being sent around, and what's possible for either collaboration or just delivering the moment from one place to another. And it's cool to hear you talk about the career opportunities too, because that was one of my questions. Just asking about what kind of opportunities students see these days, but also being reminded that the, what you said, like wanting to make records and stream it. I think that comes from, obviously we're older generation, so that's what we grew up with. But I think, you become a fan first. And so I think that's part of it too. It's like you become a fan of something that represents, the artist. And there's a lot of other factors that go into bringing that artist to you as a listener.
True.
And so sometimes you think you want to go make that record, you want to go produce the thing. I have a lot of interns that would come and, what do you want to do? Well, I want to be a mixer. I always want to start there.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And then accompanying that is also like sometimes a lot of naysayers around traditional industry of music. It's like, oh, it's not like it used to be or whatever. So it's encouraging to hear you talk about like, who cares? There's like all this other stuff going on.
Yeah, thank God it's not like it used to be, because there was a point where if you were an assistant, then you were going to be an assistant. I mean, it was a 10-year town, and you could be doing the best like mixing and first engineer work, and you really had to cross like a threshold to break out. There were walls between audio concepts, but you have more access, and you have more ability to judge reaction to what it is you're creating, and you can start thinking on multiple levels. As you were saying, how words become brands become descriptions. So I like to say immersive. I don't think like immersive is everyone has to go out and spend $25,000 on speakers. But I think it's smart to start trying to find some sort of affordable way to work in immersive. And you can do a 714 in Pro Tools, and you could get like some sort of binaural listening environment, headphones, or you could create some sort of small speaker and just sort of get into that. You don't have to be in the full-blown expensive room to get the concept down. And I remember, you probably remember when we first started having to stem mixes, it was just like, man, it doesn't combine and sound right. Well, Then you got through that and you started discovering like, oh my gosh, all of this frequency problem that I have is in this area of this mix. I feel like immersive is going to do that again. If you take...
Because you're not trying to jam everything into two speakers.
Correct. So we're probably being older, we're trying to create a great stereo. And then it's important for us to learn, like, how do we take that into a hemisphere or a sphere immersively? And that's going to be in live performance as well. And that's going to inform a lot of what you create inside of your audio. And it's going to help you discover things and rein things in and develop your skill level.
Where are some places that, maybe this is an obvious question, but where do you see the listener experiencing this immersive stuff?
Well, it's the Netflix, you have to deliver an immersive. So that's where I was going. I think that like audio professionals out there right now, I just want to say to you that you're probably going to create immersive for the medium, that it's all media. So the medium is going to want some sort of immersive quality in it because it's available in the broadcast for the consumer. And you'll probably create immersive mixes, and you'll be collapsing them and making sure they work stereo, whereas Lidge and I would be working stereo, and then we could pull it and see it work in a hemisphere or a sphere. We're going to be
we'd
doing
be collapsing it down to mono.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing. Like that was our phase correlation in the drums, and your choices in the two vocal processes, one being an amp and a high fidelity, is we're always collapsing those together in a mono, a singular thing, to see if we have the best thing.
Well, that's pretty exciting too. Even for me as an old guy wanting to continue making rock records in my studio, it's a little less thrilling to think about spending what I spent to put 2 great speakers in there, to have to put in a whole ton of them. But like you said, there's ways to do that with smaller speakers and simpler versions, and then the binaural headphone version.
Mm-hmm.
My gut tells me that whatever complaints people might have about working that way now,
Mm-hmm.
where they might say, "Oh, it doesn't translate to the speakers right yet," or whatever, all that's going to get sorted out because the future is going to look a little different. But the idea that what's exciting and what I'm getting to is, I'm still loving pursuing a stereo mix. But, sometimes it can also feel like I've been there, done that, like you figure something out. So I think it'll be pretty cool for older generations for us to think like, oh, we can completely rediscover recording by exploring this immersive world. And what does it mean now to mic up a band for this? What does it mean to mix it? What does it mean to record vocals this way?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to want to have in the actual performance more options of capture that might not be used, that are available and edited in the same manner so that they are available for other usage. As you say, it's going to, like, not liking, as being an older creator, not liking something isn't a reason to not dive into it, because traversing that sort of like, I don't really want to do that, and then getting to a place to where that's kind of cool, it is growth. So, and these are all versions of growth that it never ends. So, you're not going to get to a place and like, that's what I do. Everyone should come to this party because that's the party I throw.
It's also interesting. I wonder if the pursuit of exciting music in a immersive is going to. I feel like there's a part of the experience of learning how to do things in stereo where you kind of blast yourself with sound for a while, and then you learn, maybe I don't want to blast myself with sound. Maybe I got to figure out ways to do this without cranking it.
Yeah.
While I'm working, I wonder if that will change working in immersive, or it'll be the same kind of challenges.
I would just say, it's the Wild West. It's like, just like from mono to stereo, you're going to have like drums on the left and bass on the right. Do
we have a guy announcing how the record was recorded before it starts?
Yeah, right. You're going to have artists that come to that and then start doing exploration into what the medium can be. Beach Boys to the Beatles to Hendrix to Jefferson Airplane to Pink Floyd. We got to go through all that with whoever is trying to create an immersive, and that's going to dictate the establishment of ideas that people want. It's not stealing to be inspired, kind of understand how someone got somewhere with something and then do it yourself, because it's not going to be the same.
Yeah.
All of those things I find very exciting. I know, back to the immersive, where I was going with that, your control room does not have to be big. In fact, for audio, it's better for it to be small. So you could be in a spare bedroom that's in, an older build, like a 12 by 12 room, and you could use iLouds and create an environment that's going to be pretty serviceable and pretty good for your outcome. It doesn't have to be the investment that you would maybe do that we've done with stereo amplifiers, speakers, multiple speakers. If you have that already, you have that stereo, you can go to that place that you know that it comes across that, but you can expand it out, and you don't have to go for $8,000 speakers if you can find a speaker that's on sale once a year for maybe $600 a speaker. And I know that's still a considerable investment, but you could do your version of that. There are some really great headphones. It's interesting. We had a gentleman stop by from Head, HEDD. His father started Atom Speakers, and his name was Freddie, and they were the most incredible headphones I had heard. They're expensive, and they were ribbon, but they had taken into account space from the ribbon driver to your ear, and that your ear and the way it fit on your head had a lot of adjustment, because the shape of your ear is very important to how you hear.
Yeah.
So working on pods isn't necessarily a good idea, because I'm checking it with pods. You want to know what that's like, but the way that we hear as humans has a lot to do with our head, which is a baffle.
Right.
And the ears, which shape where the sound goes in, is another type of baffle.
Yeah, if the sound comes from behind the earlobe versus in front of it, or the pinea, the ear pinea. So.
Yeah. I like your pronunciation.
Thank you very much. That's all fascinating stuff. And I guess with the, with the coming technology too, already Apple, my iPhone did this. It let me sort of scan my ears and my head, and it gave me its own, personal immersive sound modeling.
And that's only going to get better.
Yeah. And then I have the Apple, the AirPod Pros, and you listen to music, and if you turn your head, the music tries to stay in place as if the speakers were still staying still. And that's interesting and fascinating. And then also the experience of watching a video off of my iPhone. I put it on the table in front of me, but I realized as I'm listening in the AirPods, I'm like, oh, it sounds like it's like a huge TV with like big ass PA speakers.
Right.
It sounds much bigger than an iPhone. And if you turn your head, the sound stays where the phone is. So it like gives you this impression that you're listening to like big theater speakers. So it's intriguing. It'll be interesting to see like which ideas really stick and which ones go away. The turning your head and having the music move around, I'm not convinced yet that that's an improvement on the listening experience for me.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a little more gimmicky.
I can't really like deal with my screen automatically flipping to where I hold it. For the same reasons.
Oh, you mean like on your phone, like if you go vertical or horizontal?
Yeah. Is it landscape? Is it portrait? Is it landscape? Is it portrait?
Because you're always looking sideways while you're laying in bed anyway. It's like, I can't sleep. I'm watching a video or something.
Yeah. There are all of those. It's the Wild West, but it's going somewhere. And, attribution, AI, all these sort of things of like creating intellectual property and how intellectual property is created, whether it is from a training model to create some sort of ability to input certain concepts, and then using artificial intelligence to create a version of what you put in as prompts. I know that that sounds like to us like very Terminator and scary, but you have a lot of things to look forward to, I think, with this, because we're at the end of a paradigm shift. So all these sorts of things are becoming faster and faster, and they're not ready for it's sort of like let people create and use it, and then we'll see what evolves as a standard, as opposed to setting a standard and knowing and then kind of keeping people within that, like from vinyl to compact disc. All that stuff's gone. So,
well, it's the very simple concept of does it stick?
Yeah,
it means you have to give it a chance to actually stick, to find out if it sticks.
And I think that
And with things changing so fast and being developed so quickly.
You have to be open to it. You don't have to let it consume you or direct you, but you should also be curious. That's the word.
Yeah.
Always be curious and always be pursuing growth, even though growth isn't, it's being in shape and being in condition are different. And that curiosity and audio applied to that from a physical standpoint is probably like a good mental place to be at, because I think that the knee-jerk reaction to AI is based upon it's going to give the ability for non-creative people to create something that is viable enough to be the thing. But that's if creatives learn how to use AI and they use it as just another tool, as we've already done with drum timing and pitch modification. We've been using basically AI in music creation for a long time. If we take what is now available and we integrate that into our process, we're going to be able to go further than the non-creatives. As creatives, we think everyone is creative. AI is for people who are not creative to be able to create something that is either entertaining or, for their intent, good enough to not use something else.
Right.
But we're going to pass through that and we're going to be fine, because creatives are going to be able to create something that non-creatives aren't able to do. And so therefore they'll need, that's my optimism.
This podcast is proud to present Recording Studio Rockstars Academy. Are you ready to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level and make your best record ever? Then visit the Academy to find the course that's right for you. Want to record killer drums in your home studio? Then check out Rockstars of Drums to learn how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with a professional Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Or if you're ready to start mastering your own records at home, then check out Rockstars of Mastering, where I walk you through exactly how I master my own records using nothing but plugins. Plus, I take you into a world-class mastering studio, Sterling Sound, to meet with Ryan Smith and hear how he professionally mastered my record, Skadoosh, for release to streaming platforms. That's the music you hear on this podcast, Rockstars. And if mixing is your focus, then check out my free mixing course, Mix Master Bundle, where I show you how to mix using stock and free plugins and Pro Tools. Plus, you get a look at how I recorded everything in my studio and multi-track downloads for you to practice mixing and even upload to your website if you want. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy to get started now. Yeah, I think as long as you have creative people, it's always going to stand out. I mean, it's just the nature of it. And also, again, that concept of stickiness. You know, if lots of non-creative people made something that was good enough, it might not stick that forever. You know, it might stick for a minute. But, the whole reason why great music and great art and great film rises to the top is because it's great, because it stands out and we appreciate it and we recognize it.
And it's okay for, the consumer of entertainment to get to a point to where they don't want any more of what they're being fed. So you could see this in music, you can see this in film. So if we've been in a comic book CGI world for a decade, what were the two biggest films this summer that far exceeded anything that came before them? They weren't CGI. They were actual stories, and they were interesting takes upon.
I don't even remember. I don't think I went to the movies.
It was Oppenheimer and Barbie.
I did see Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer and Barbie. So there's going to be something that is so big that everyone goes, "Ooh, we need to do that." I mean, think about the world that.
I would have rather seen Spinal Tap 2, though.
Yeah, that's true. But think about like the world that Lucas and Spielberg and
what they created,
Cassavetes and Coppola, and the film industry they entered when they started making films, and we live in what they created, and then we live in the economy of a big studio being able to do something different. And you're going to experience that with audio immersive and artificial intelligence, but creatives and artists who have a vision, who hold everybody to trying to create the thing where everyone has the experience that was that vision is, hopefully we'll be able to do art for commerce long enough to do that.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you one more question and go to our closing question too.
All right.
So this question is, when you're talking about remaining interested in learning and stuff, now working with the university, working here in the studio, do you see people coming back to school? Do you see much of that? Do you see people coming back to learn and study audio from the industry?
Do. I think that if you've had a bachelor's degree and you really want to go into the science behind audio, but you also have a production value, that there's a master's program. I think that there are certificate programs that won't be as cost prohibitive as pursuing degrees. I think that as a commercial educational facility that will fit nicely into that, we have orchestra and we have game, documentary, film, audio occurring in A, because 70 plus people can be in there at one time and create a big sound.
Let me ask a question related to that. So
yeah,
it's almost like a school of liberal arts with different audio focuses. Do students come here and get a chance to see what they all feel like a little bit before they decide which direction they want to go in?
they do. So it's more like you begin with a basic bachelor's of science, and then you can go inside of that bachelor's of science in the direction that you want to go. You can switch your major and be more in media and entertainment. You could have like a bachelor's of art. You could have a bachelor's of science. You could have a bachelor's of business administration. They're just cool versions of those degrees, and you can emphasize where you want to go in that. You're also in a place where a lot of like-minded people are doing it every day, and you get to a point later on after you've got the foundational that you're around those. So there could be a legendary artist in making a record for their 40th anniversary, and then next week there could be a score for an EA sports game or another version of Call of Duty.
And as a student, you get to be around that because you guys have the studio.
Yes, and you can aspire. Most studio-owned education facilities pay their student workers because you can't use that as an internship. The two ways that you can do an internship is you can go to a place and experience working in that environment because they're doing the things that you're interested in for credit towards your degree, or you can go there and be paid.
Mm-hmm.
And typically, like Sound Emporium being owned by Lipscomb and us being owned by Belmont, that as a student worker, you're going to be compensated because that's fair. And Berkeley with the record plant. We had people from Abbey Road Institute in visiting earlier, actually this year, like late spring. And the head of that had designed a bachelor's of science for another school and had left that and then came in to head Abbey Road Institute. And he literally makes everyone who's going to get into that media program, they switched it to media, but you have to perform something on video and you have to feel what it's like to be a performer and to be filmed in order to have empathy when that's occurring and not be worried about, is it patched? Is it working? Is this a thing? You have to feel like I'm sitting there waiting for this moment to be heard and feel all of those nerves. And I think that that's a really cool idea.
That's pretty wild. Yeah. Well, it's cool to hear you describing it too with the colleges, the universities acquiring the studios and keeping that going, because it just made me think like, well, the medical industry has been doing that for ages. It's a hospital and it's a teaching place and it's all in one.
And you think about it, it's like one of those like aha moments. This isn't different. Like it got to be independent cottage sort of recording environments, but rewind a little bit. I mean, all of the incredible like glam into goth sort of pop occurring in England at Trident, there was a label and a management company. If you look at Abbey Road, that was a label with a creative staff, with publishing and management. You look at all of these different places, they were usually attached to an office of a creative space, be it a publisher, be it a management company, be it an independent label, or the combination of all of it.
Yeah.
Those were housed inside of studios.
Yeah. I mean, Fame, Motown.
Fame, yeah.
Stax.
Yeah.
All of them. All right. Well, so let me ask the closing question. This is hypothetical, and you've answered it once before, but it's been so long, you've forgotten what you said. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine, and you get to go back in time and find young Joe and say, "Listen, young Joe. Hey, Joe, where are you going with that record in your hand? I've come back to give you this single bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day." What advice would you go back and give yourself if you could?
Protect yourself from desperation, because no good choices occur in that state.
Yeah. So just be rock and roll with a little bit of a savings account.
Yeah, I mean that's it. I get a little bit like it's emotional, because at this point, like coming over, like having taught for 10 years, still making records, and then being director. My real joy is, it's funny. People that I make records with, they're like, "Do you miss like recording all the time?" And I like go, "Yes," until I'm doing it.
Right.
Right. So, but the point is, I still love to do it. And I find the joy in that. But the other thing that I find is watching people that you've crossed paths with that are young Joes or young Lidge, and you see that they're connecting it and they're doing that. Now, the thing that you do is you might have this incredible passion and this love to do something, and you should always do that, but you should balance it with people who are more successful with me. How can I run with them, learn what they're doing, and be a part of those successes, which afford you more opportunity, and more places to win trust, to build your own business, build your own brand. And that's what I would tell young Joe is, like, you don't always have to blow up the bridge. You don't have to burn it. You could just say, "I don't know the password, troll. I'm not crossing." How you like how I looped that?
I just love it, man. I love it. I was reminding me, I forgot which one it was. Was it like, was it like the Holy Grail or something, where they come to the bridge and they say the wrong thing and you just go flying through the air into the fog, down into the chasm below?
Yeah. I've been there. It's not a fun landing.
Well, and it's, you bring up a point of that. I jokingly said, like, live rock and roll, but have a savings account. There is the financial aspect of desperation in choosing an artistic lifestyle. But there's also, regardless of that, there's also a sense sometimes when you're so deep in making music with a particular artist or a record or whatever, you just lose all your perspective about what's true, what's real, and stuff like that. And so those are moments of, like, you might decide to do things that you would have otherwise maybe had a clearer head about had you given yourself a break and a balance in life. There was so many times I did records and I just had no clue whether what we were doing was good or bad, or we should keep going.
Yeah.
Any of that stuff. So it's good advice.
I think, I think even after you've been in it a long time, you have maybe a spark that something's happening, but whether that translates to an audience is a different thing. And young Joe might have not been able to make that distinction. And in that, you can, as you say, get so far into something that you actually lose like a more complete life.
Yeah.
It is just a record. And and if you are thinking that unless this record is made, no other record will ever be made, you're like a great candidate for rehab.
We need record rehab program.
Exactly.
Awesome, dude. Well, thank you for joining us on Recording Studio Rockstars again. Rockstars,
Awesome.
thanks for listening.
Always enjoyed.
Joe, you're awesome, dude.
You're awesome.
Oh, let the Rockstars know, where should they go if they want to check out more about you, or if they just want to look at the studio or the recording program, learn more about that?
OceanWayNashville.com. My contact will be on there. I put together it was nice that you asked me for like a Spotify playlist, but I've been working on just pulling stuff in. There's all those things on there I find fun and are from a time that I remember and have stories around them. But it's like getting close to being like 13 hours of music. So
that's awesome.
For anyone, there's a lot of crap in there.
Well,
good and bad.
Reminder, Rockstars, just scroll down in the show notes and you can click on the link, right, to go over to listen to Joe's records. And then we might have moved it over to our own playlist, but I'll make sure that it's linked to yours so that if you add new stuff,
yeah, that'd be great.
It shows up. Yeah,
that'd be awesome. And I do the occasional different things for different audio companies and things that we really like. Or that you just find. So pretty aware of most of those that are out there. There's a couple of new ones that haven't come out yet, but yeah.
Awesome, man.
Stay in touch.
All right, dude. Good to see you, man.
Good to
see you around the studio next time.
Awesome.
Peace out.
Peace out.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who help make this episode possible: Lewitt, Grace Design, Adam Audio, Native Instruments, and Isotope. And remember, at isotope.com and nativeinstruments.com, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plug-in purchase. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, then please check out our sponsors using the links in our show notes below, because it's a great way to help support this show. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio because they're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars: Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and Liz Hulitskaya. Thanks so much for listening, Rockstars, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.